The Frithiof Saga, Chapter 3, King Bel and Thorsten. King Bela and Thorsten, his faithful old brother-in-arms, were now bowed with the weight of years, like two ruined temples upon whose walls are graven runes of wisdom still powerful to stir the hearts of reverent beholders. One day, the king said to Thorsten, "My friend, the evening of life draws on. No longer has the mead its wonted flavor, and heavy grows the helm upon my weary head. The world grows dim before my eyes, but clear and bright toward me streams the light of Valhalla. Therefore, I have summoned our sons hither. As we have ever stood fast by each other, so it is my wish that they should do. With this and other matters, I would charge the young eagles ere my lips are sealed by death." The three youths soon entered the royal hall, Helga the eldest first. Pale and gloomy of countenance was he, as if the terrors of the Death Kingdom had set their seal upon him. With blood-stained hands, fresh from the sacrificial grove he came, for he was wont to tarry there, communing with seers and soothsayers. Behind him followed Halfdan, his brother, whose bright locks framed a face noble indeed, of feature, but weak and effeminate in expression. The sword at his side seemed worn but in jest, and he looked like some fair maid who had sportively donned the garb of a hero. Last came Frithiof, a blue mantle hanging from his shoulders and taller by a head than his companions. As the three stood before the king, it was like the bright noonday between rosy morn and dusky night. Then the king began, "My end is nigh, O sons, wherefore I charge ye, govern the land in harmony. For union is like the lance ring, without which the strength of the lance is lost. Let force stand guard before the country's gates, but within its boundaries cherish the holy blossoms of peace. Lift not your swords save against the foe. Let your shields be the safeguard of the peasant's home. A foolish prince is he who oppresses his own people, for as their strength is so is his own. The leafy crown of a tree whose sapless trunk is rooted in bare rock soon withers. 4 pillars of stone support the dome of heaven. The throne rests only upon one, the law. Woe to the land where violence reigns, for thereby shall both ruler and people perish. The gods, O Helge, do indeed dwell in temples, but not in them alone. So far as voice can reach, so far as the sun's golden beams can penetrate, or the thoughts of man can fly, so wide are the halls of their boundless sanctuaries. The blood of sacrificial victims oft deceives. Runes, howsoever deeply graven, sometimes prove false. But upon a just and upright heart, O Helge, Odin hath inscribed runes which God and man may trust. As flowers adorn the brazen shield, so doth gentleness become strength. It is not winter, but balmy spring that opens the bud of life. Make to yourself true friends. A friendless chief, be he ever so mighty, is like a tree whose bark has been stripped away by storms. But he who is blessed with true friendship is like the forest giant, shielded from tempests by the companions that surround it. Boast not of thy ancestors' deeds and honors. What avails the heritage of a mighty bow which thou hast neither the strength nor the skill to bend? The fame of thy sires rests with them in the grave. In its own waves the rushing stream flows onward to the sea." Then, turning to his second son, the king continued, "Thou too, O Halfdan, hear my words and treasure them in thy heart. A pleasant wit is the adornment of the wise, but idle chatter befits none, least of all a prince's son. Honey is sweet, but without hops no mead can be brewed. Put steel into thy sword, Halfdan, and earnestness into thy play. Never yet lived there man who knew too much, however famed for wisdom, but countless is the number of those who know too little. Disregarded at the feast sits the fool, who holds the seat of honor by right of birth alone. 'Tis to the wise man the guests lend ear, however lowly be his seat. Choose not every man to be thy blood brother. An empty house stands open to all who pass. The rich man's door is barred. Entrust thy confidence to but one. What is known to three is known to all the world. The old king ceased, and Thorsten arose. To permit thee, King Bel, to wander alone through Odin's halls befits not one who hath ever been thy comrade upon earth. Together we have shared life's changes, and in death methinks we shall not be parted. Then, to Frithiof his son, he said, The years have whispered many a counsel in my ear for thee, my son. As Odin's birds hover about the burial mound, so do the teachings of experience linger on the lips of age. This above all else lay thou to heart. Honor the gods. From them alone spring all blessing and prosperity, even as it is they who send the storm wind and the life-giving sun rays. They gaze into the heart's most secret depths, whither no man's eyes can penetrate. Avoid evil. Long years must oft do penance for 1 hour's sin. Obey the king. One must be lord over all if the land would prosper. The night hath many lights, the day but one. Willingly should the better man do homage to the best. One handle only hath the sword. He who grasps it elsewhere wounds his hand. Strength is a gift of the gods, but without judgment, force is of small avail. The bear has the strength of 12 men, yet he is slain by one. Against the sword thrust, hold the shield. Against violence, the law. Guard thy heart from pride. Few are moved to fear thereby, but all to hate. The more arrogant thou growest, the nearer is thy fall. Many have I seen soar high, who now must go on crutches. Praise not the day before its end, the mead before 'tis drunk, nor the counsel before 'tis proved. Youth is prone to trust the lightest word, but battle tests the value of a blade, and friendship is tried by need. Trust neither the ice of a night nor the snows of spring. It is true of all men that strength of body and mind must pass away, but the fame of an upright man lives on forever. Therefore, oh, my son, resolve only what is noble, do only what is right. So spake the aged heroes, whose sage warnings are still passed from mouth to mouth in the Northland. They further charged their sons to perpetuate the friendship that had bound them together through life in weal and woe. Ever back to back we stood when danger threatened, said King Bela, and if it came still closer than with one shield we met it. Hold fast together as one man, ye three, and never shall the Northland see your overmatch. For strength bound to kingly rank and power is like the steel rim that encircles the shield of gold. Fail not to greet for me my fair Rose Ingeborg, who in peace and quiet hath bloomed as becomes a royal maiden. Shield her well with brotherly love and loyalty, that no rude tempest bear away my tender flower. Be thou a father to her. Helga, guard her as your own child, yet forget not that harsh constraint will oft revolt a noble heart, which by gentleness may easily be guided in the path of virtue and of custom. Let our weary bodies be laid to rest beneath 2 grave mounds, on either side of the stream, that its rushing waters may chant for us eternal praises of the heroes. Oft at the midnight hour, when the pale moon sheds her silvery splendors and the cooling dews descend upon our mounds, shall thou and I, my Thorsten, discourse of olden days across the flood, and our voices will mingle with the murmuring of the waves. And now, dear sons, farewell. Farewell. Leave us in peace, that far from the court we may prepare ourselves to enter into the glories of Valhalla. Chapter 4. Frithiof's Inheritance. The 2 aged heroes died as they had hoped, within a short time of each other, and were buried as King Bela had bidden, the 2 princes being declared joint heirs to the throne by decree of the people, while Frithiof took possession of his heritage, Framnus. His lands were on the coast, and extended for 3 miles in each direction. Forests of birch crowned the mountain tops, whose slopes were covered with golden barley and waving rye, growing to the height of a man. Lakes teeming with fish mirrored the wooded heights. Through the forests, threaded with rushing streams, roamed noble stags, proud and stately as kings. On the rich meadows, herds of cattle with sleek, glossy hides cropped the green sward, while here and there roved flocks of sheep like fleecy cloudlets slowly drifting across the blue vault of heaven. Ranged in 2 rows, 12 pairs of fiery coursers pawed impatiently in their stalls. Shod with shining steel were their hoofs, their manes knotted with red. The great drinking hall was so spacious that 600 guests would scarcely fill it. Round the wall extend a table of polished oak, and on either sides of the high seat, images of the gods were skillfully carved from elm wood, one representing the Allfather Odin, the other Frey, who rules over the rain and sunshine. Over the high seat where Thorsten had sat for so many years, a glossy black bearskin, with scarlet jaws, and the claws tipped with silver, was thrown. Midway of the hall was the great hearth of smoothly polished stone, whence the dancing flames shot ceaselessly upward, and suspended around the walls, helm and shield and sword glittered in the reflection of the blaze. Rich indeed was the dwelling. Abundance everywhere met the eye. Crowded presses, well-filled cellars and storerooms, while many a jewel, spoil of many a conquest, lay hidden in close-locked chests. But the 3 most precious possessions of the house were famed throughout the land. Of these the first was a sword, called Angervadel, or Brother of Lightning. Forged by dwarfs in some far eastern land, Frithiof's ancestors had wrought with it many heroic deeds. The hilt was of hammered gold, and the blade was covered with strange runes, the meaning of which are unknown save to those who forged it in the distant Orient. When Frithiof drew it from the sheath, it flashed like the lightning or the streaming northern lights. Moreover, a magic power belonged to this wondrous heirloom. So long as peace ruled the land, the runes on the blade gleamed dull and pale, but when war prevailed, they burned red as the comb of a fighting cock. Next to this sword in renown was an arm ring of pure gold, the work of halting Vaunlund, the Vulcan of the north. Graved on it were the names of the holy gods and their castles, with the signs of the changing seasons, while crowning the circlet, as the sun crowns the heavens, was a splendid ruby. This ring had long been an heirloom of the house, and had once been stolen by the robber Sot, who roved the seas, pillaging and destroying. News came at last to Thorsten that Sot had caused himself to be buried with all his treasures in a walled-up mound on the shores of Britain. Yet there his spirit found no rest, but haunted the place as a spectre. Forthwith Thorsten resolved to seek this ghostly visitant, and with Bella, who offered to accompany him, took ship and sailed away to the shore of Britain, where they soon found Sot's place of burial. Like a sunken palace was the grave mound, over which lay piled up vast heaps of earth and ruined stonework. Thorsten and Bella peered through a chink of the doorway into the vaulted depths. There stood the black Viking ship, and high up on the mast squatted a grisly shape wrapped up in blue flaming mantle, its staring eyes rolling while it vainly endeavored to scour the bloodstains from a rusty sword. All about lay heaps of gold, and on the arm of the phantom gleamed Thorsten's precious heirloom, the stolen arm ring. Bella whispered to Thorsten, "Let us go down together and fight with this fiery spectre." But half angrily Thorsten answered, "Nay, 1 against 1 was the custom of our fathers. Alone will I strive with it." Long they contended as to which should first encounter the ghastly foe, but the lot fell to Thorsten. One blow of his spear burst in the door, and he descended into the vault, while shield before him and sword in hand, King Bella listened without. Wild chantings he heard at first, like some magic spell, then loud clashing sounds as of swords crossed in conflict. Then came a horrible scream, followed by instant silence. And out staggered Thorsten, pale and distraught. But on his arm he bore the ring, Never in after days would he relate what happened in those awful depths, and when questioned would turn away shuddering. But he was often wont to say, "Truly, 'twas dearly bought, this arm-ring, but once in my life have I trembled, and that was when I took it." Last of the three family treasures was the good ship Eleadah, Frithiof's ancestor, Viking, so it was said, returning once from a foray, discovered on his own shores a shipwrecked man. Tall he looked and nobly formed, with an open countenance, whose expression was constantly changing like the glancing of waves in the sunlight. Sea-green floated his hair, white as wave foam his beard. A blue mantle enveloped his form, and the golden belt he wore was set with corals. Steering directly to the spot, Viking rescued the unfortunate, took him to his home, and feasted him right nobly. But when at night the stranger was offered a bed, he shook his head, smiling. "Fair is the wind, and my ship a good one," he said, "and many a mile I hope to leave behind me ere the break of day. Naught but thanks have I to offer thee in return for thy hospitality, for my wealth lies deep beneath the ocean wave. Yet in the morning it may be thou wilt find some gift from me upon the shore." At daybreak Viking hastened to the shore, and lo! With swiftness of the sea-eagle darting upon its prey, there came flying into the haven one of the warships commonly known as dragons. Not a soul was to be seen on board, neither steersman nor rowers. Yet unerringly the rudder guided its winding course amid rocks and shoal. As it neared the land, the sails furled themselves, the anchor fell, and the slender vessel rested quietly upon the sandy beach. As Viking stood gazing in astonishment at all this, voices sounded from the dancing waves. They chanted, "The man thou didst rescue and shelter was Aegir, the lord of the sea. He forgets not his debt. See, yon dragon, he sendeth as token to thee." Royal indeed was the gift of the sea god. The solid beams of the ship were not joined in the usual way, but grown together. Long and dragon-shaped it lay upon the water, the head reared high, wide jaws gleaming red with gold, the body speckled with blue and gold, and ending at the rudder in a coiling tail covered with silver scales. Black were the sails, with edgings of gold, and when each was full stretched, the ship flew like the storm wind, swifter than the sea-eagle. With all these treasures and more besides, Frithiof, next to the two kings, was the richest man in all of the land. Kingly of nature was he, if not by birth, and gentle and noble in word and deed. 12 mighty champions had he ever beside him, tried comrades of his dead father. Among these greybeards, like a rose set in a wreath of withered leaves, was a youth called Bjorn, joyous as a child, yet with the strength of manhood and the wisdom of age. Frithiof had grown up with him, and together they had sworn blood brotherhood. Sorrowfully, amid these heroes sat Frithiof in the high seat, draining the mead horn at his father's grave feast, after the customs of his ancestors, while, with a heavy heart, he listened to the thundering hero songs sounded in praise of the departed. Chapter 5. Frithiof's Wooing. Each day the great hall echoed to the sounds of harp strings and rang with praises of the great deeds of his sires, but naught could rouse Frithiof from his melancholy. Once more the spring awoke with smiles. The blue sea was flecked with selling sails of ships, and still his gloom remained unbroken. His thoughts ever dwelt on the happy days at Hilding's abode, when the king's child was his beloved companion. At last Bjorn went to him and said, "Why does Frithiof sit like a wounded eagle in its eyrie? What is amiss with thee, my friend? Surely thou hast no lack of lands or goods. Song and harp sound for thee by night and day. The mead-horn passes from hand to hand, but vainly thy good steed stamps in his stall. Vainly the hooded falcon screams for prey. See how Eleadah strains at her cable and spreads her wings, impatient to be free." Then Frithiof clasped his friend's hand and, shaking off his sorrow, embarked with his comrades in the dragon, which was soon speeding onward through the foaming waves. Helga and Halfdan were sitting on their father's grave mound near the sea, holding judgment for the people, when Eleadah approached. Frithiof landed with his men, and, entering the circle of warriors, thus addressed the two kings. I stand here before ye, O kings, as suitor for the hand of Ingeborg. Surely your dead father would have smiled upon our union, since 'twas by his wish that we grew up together under Hilding's guidance, like two saplings with branches intertwined, whose tops Frigga winds about with silver thread. Of no royal race am I, 'tis true, but the fame of my sires is ofttimes sung in royal halls, as well ye know. Easily might I win for myself a kingdom, and wear the golden circlet on my brow, but 'tis my choice rather to dwell in the land of my birth, my sword ever ready to defend the throne or the hut of the poor. On King Bella's mound we stand, in the depths below he heareth and speaketh for me. Join ye the hands of Frithiof and Ingeborg. Frowning darkly, Helga rose and scornfully replied, Not for a peasant's son is our sister destined. None but a prince may hope to win her. Thou art called the mightiest hero in all the Northland. Let that content thy pride, and aspire not to the hand of a maiden whose forefathers sprung from Odin himself. My kingdom needs not thy service. That shall be our own care. But if thou wouldst have a place at court among my hired warriors, that I will not deny thee. Frithiof laughed grimly. I be thy vassal? Nay, I am a man for myself, even as was my father. Out, Angervathel, from thy sheath. Bright flashed the blade in the sunlight, the runes glowing fiery red. Now, Angervathel, let us see if any shall deny that thou at least art high-born and noble. As for thee, King Helga, stood we not upon this sacred mound, I would smite thee to dust. Take heed hereafter, that thou come not too near my blade. With one final blow, Frithiof clove in twain Helga's golden shield that hung upon an oak tree, and the two haths fell with a crash that awakened hollowed echoes from the vault below. Well struck, my sword, cried Frithiof. Hide now thy gleams, and dream thou of exploits more noble. Terror seized Helga and his followers, and all looked on silently while Frithiof returned to his ship and was borne swiftly away over the water, out to the deep blue sea.